Welcome back to the Work Cultured podcast. Today, we've got Alejandro Laplana with us. He is a founder and CEO of Shokworks and a managing partner of the Kevlar Fund. They invest in tons and tons of great companies. He's up to a lot of good stuff himself. So, Alejandro, hey, thanks for being on the show today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, give us just a quick high level. Who are you? How did you get to where you are?
No problem. Yeah, so I started off my career in finance, investment banking, prop trading, and whatnot. Then I accidentally veered into tech through a client of the investment bank that I was working with. We ended up creating a payments company, selling that, then started up a patent fund, which was pretty revolutionary at the time, but there were some gaping execution bottlenecks that I wasn't aware of, right? I was a little too focused on the sales and fundraising side of the equation, neglected some aspects of delivery that I was counting on partners to do. But again, it was my fault for not overseeing them the way I should. So anyhow, that kind of fell flat, but ultimately it forced me to move down to South America, learn delivery from A to Z, build out a team for the existing portfolio companies that then blossomed into hundreds of engineers that employ thousands by extension and amass a portfolio of companies that we've been able to help. And our claim to fame is that we've created $2 billion companies, I suppose.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a bit. So, starting in finance and then into this journey, has that background been kind of a pillar for you, right? Like taking a look at the money side of it and the stewardship and all that? Because it sounds like you do, you guys are a technology company, but it sounds like you're doing more money moving than you may be technology. I'm not sure. Fill me in.
Yeah, I mean, look, we see services as a form of capital contribution that allows us through our profits to invest in the top quartile of our client base, which then becomes a portfolio. It's not that we invest in everything blindly. We usually don't touch 90 to 95% of the companies we work with. That said, the ones we're always trying to, we've perfected the art of servicing startups because we've come from the other side, on the finance side, on the operations side.
Yeah.
So with that, we're able to leverage services as a form of capital contribution. We also invest cash through Kevlar, and we've learned not to take a bunch of angel positions in a bunch of companies. Instead, we take large concentrated bets in what works, what we know we can add value to, and what we know is defensible in the market.
Okay. Man, I have a lot of questions about that,
Yeah.
especially your hand. We're obviously here, we talk about culture and company culture, and I imagine you have your own, and you probably also have a hand in, or at least a visibility to the culture of a lot of the companies that you work with. But I want to get into that, but I don't want to skip our first question because we ask every guest the same question. And I warned you, right? What is a mistake that you've made in leadership that you'll never forget?
Yeah, totally. So when I first started Shokworks, it was through an acquisition of a local company in South America. And rookie mistake as far as not being an operator, like day to day, rather, I was reliant on partners in the past. I thought that the skill sets transferred over. I thought that, so I did financial due diligence. I did
Sure.
all kinds of due diligence except verifying the actual skill sets. And this was in the soccer market, a client, and that then became a huge partner of ours and was one of our portfolio companies. But there was a big game in soccer. I'm not at liberty to disclose which one, but it was massive. And there was just such a gaping skills gap that as soon as the match started, we just went flat, right? We just crashed.
Wow.
For the duration of the match. And I mean, the company almost died before it started. So
Oof.
then, we brought in a couple of consultants from Silicon Valley, started really working on remedying the skills gap, building an appropriate delivery team, but it was a bit of a baptism of fire.
No doubt. Yeah. And how long do you feel like it took you to kind of plug in the right people and the right skills from that almost catastrophe?
Yeah, so in a normal situation, where it was more proactive rather than reactive, it could have taken a lot longer. Here we were so time constrained that we were forced to get it right in less than a quarter, and we
Wow.
did.
Wow. What what were some secrets to doing that with such a fast turnaround? I mean,
Yeah,
and the reason I ask, right, the right people in the right
yeah.
seats, I mean, that's one of every CEO's top headaches. So in crisis mode,
Mhm.
you can tend to make mistakes, especially on that front, because you're just trying to get warm bodies sometimes. But it sounds like you didn't do that at all.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to say that after that quarter we were perfect. There were still a bunch of learnings, and I'd say we've only really perfected, or not perfected, but achieved uh, a solid work culture in the past year or two, right? So, and
Hmm.
here we're talking 7 years back, right? So
Yeah.
we were able to have the team, the required team to deliver, right? But I mean, there was still a bunch. It was like a Swiss cheese. There were holes everywhere. So, which we were filling in over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And what role does culture play now? I mean, you're obviously more stabilized. You have 7 or 8 years under your belt. Where does that fall into your spectrum?
Yeah, so culture is, it's kind of it's an interesting term. Some people overuse it, others don't really understand it. But culture are a set of beliefs and practices that permeate across the organization. One of ours is that we're extremely client centric and solution centric. We don't really take no for an answer unless the task is absolutely impossible. And then it's a culture of leading by example. So, if we have to get into the weeds of a problem and stay up for countless, hours in the morning and nights and so forth, then, people are willing to, and the management team and leadership team and even executive committee are willing to roll up their sleeves.
Yeah. So for you, it's those core beliefs and values. They're not just words on a page.
Yeah.
Everyone's real clear on what those behaviors look like to be living into those core values.
Yeah, totally. Whether it's, culture or, a set of heuristics or values that have been embedded into the organization, and that's what we try to that's what we try to promote and hold our people accountable to.
Hmm. Have you had to adjust any of those?
Yeah,
So
totally.
you come up with some core value. What was one that maybe didn't work?
I mean, just speaking candidly, I'm very type A bit of a control freak, and I'm all about meeting deadlines and just satisfying whatever the need may be in real time. So there was no work-life balance. There was, we're
Mm,
talking about burning everyone out in a matter of months. So we've had to make some tweaks there and add certain layers of really of a more nurturing work culture, right, and a more balanced work culture. We still have the same level of we still demand the same accountability from our workforce, but we've managed to kind of rein it in a bit.
yeah. And what's the makeup? I mean, because you talk about burning people out as a CEO, you're able to work those late nights.
Yeah,
You don't want to do it all the time, but that you're not going to burn out, right? Because you have that intrinsic motivation.
yeah.
It's your company. What's the makeup of some of the other folks? Maybe it's the ELT, and how does that affect those people?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And even as a CEO, there are times where you lose motivation or,
Yeah.
you feel things are stagnant or, you have crises of meaning or anything that may transpire, right?
Yeah.
But overall, I think that what we try to do is um, keep people intrigued, and what we're doing are very what we're solving for are very complicated problems, very interesting projects. So we try to kind of keep people invested into whatever their project is, but also upskilling them and learning and making themselves more valuable. So by fostering a culture of wanting to solve challenges and continuous learning, we found that motivation tends to follow and people want to work more. If they're just stuck in very basic problems and not building skills or are building themselves up, then it doesn't work. It rarely works.
Right. So just fostering constant growth and
Yeah,
problem solving and
yeah,
tackling more than the mundane
yeah.
minutia. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're lucky that just by circumstance, or I guess by design, where we've positioned ourselves, we do encounter some of the world's most challenging technical problems, and we're building some very exciting companies. So
Yeah.
then another challenge is to have our workforce, even though they're not necessarily owners in these projects, to take ownership and pride in what they're building, in an ancillary capacity.
Yeah. Have you found any just secrets, golden nuggets that you can share with us, especially that last thing you just said, right?
Yeah.
Getting people to have ownership when they don't have, literal financial ownership, but that intrinsic motivation that they're like, I am in this. I love the purpose, the meaning behind what we're doing. What's your secret there?
Yeah, so one is having a horizontal communications framework between our portfolio company client and our workforce, directly keeping them apprised to how the product that they're working on and the business is progressing, and all the recognition and growth associated with that, and ultimately some variable comp structures. We've been toying with the idea of tokenizing elements of the revenue of some of the companies that we have in our portfolio,
Hmm.
and adding an employee pool that can remunerate them proportionally to what they've contributed, right? So that's another way that we're
Yeah, that's interesting.
toying with. We haven't gotten it right yet, but it's in the works.
Yeah, we had a previous guest who talked about those like contribution incentives and how, he had a version of it that just totally backfired
Mhm.
and pissed everybody off, and then a version of it that really worked. So yeah, toying with it is the key phrase there, because that's going to take some tweaking, I imagine.
Yeah, totally. No, we were interviewed by the Wall Street Journal a year and a half ago about this specifically. We've had a few pilots with varying levels of success, but I think we'll probably roll it out in 2025.
Wow. Okay. When you have all of these other clients that or I guess, are they clients? Are they firms that you've invested in?
Yeah, so I'd say maybe 90% clients, 10%
So you call them
firms
clients.
invested in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you have clients come along or firms, are you just kind of taking on their technology portfolio, or are you also kind of putting a hand in their business strategy, their financial strategy, even their culture?
So that's a good question. In some cases, it's purely the product, but we engage in a manner where we help define what the business priorities are, and then the technology follows that. So, in many ways, we are getting embedded in culture and we are getting embedded in strategy, but it's primarily product. Others where we're more invested in, I serve on boards, lead both boards of directors, boards of advisors, different committees like compensation committees, right? So there
Yep.
it's more holistic, and it spans, 360 degrees across the company. So we become deeply immersed in the culture,
Yeah.
and we're also consulted on strategic maneuvers, right? And just strategic vision.
Yeah. And I assume a good chunk of your clients are startups in their very kind of initial phases.
Well, yeah, I mean, not always. I'd
No.
say
Okay.
the bulk of them are startups, but they have varying degrees of maturity. We
Gotcha.
have everything from very early stage all the way to companies that do several hundreds of million in revenue.
And having seen a lot of those types of companies, what's some free advice you would give the listeners that might be in that stage themselves, startup mode, whether early or even further down the road? What mistakes do you see them making, and what advice might you throw out there?
Yeah, look, I'd say, and this might be a little counterintuitive, but shift your orientation from trying to appease investors and raise money, and really focus on getting your product out to users, customers as quickly as possible, try to bypass early stage institutional capital as much as you can. And once you're ready, once you have a clear path for growth, then seek out that capital.
Yeah. I've actually heard that quite a bit, right? If you can prove it first
Right.
because you're obsessed with the product,
Yeah.
the money will follow. It's a much easier conversation.
Right. And you can also bootstrap, by the way. You can,
Totally.
we haven't, I mean, I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, but I've also, I haven't raised a penny in Shokworks, right? It was profitable since day one.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and, we bootstrapped a fund as well, right? A family office, which is Kevlar.
Yeah.
So there are ways to kind of get to a certain threshold without outside capital. Then when you need and when it becomes indispensable to meet the next chapter of your growth story, then for sure raise it, and it'll be a lot easier if there's a compelling case, both for growth and to generate a return for your investors. But a lot of people tend to prioritize capital, and they want to take the VC route, even if they're not a company that can yield venture scale results, right? So it just becomes like a chronicle of death foretold.
Right. Now I have a kind of almost the flip of that question. I look back, my first startup in 2010 ultimately only lasted a few years.
Hmm?
And I think my mistake was not looking at funding. My
Okay.
biggest competitor, we built the same technology, delivered. I thought we had better service than they did, but they raised round A, round B, round C. And ultimately, the year I folded is the year they sold to GoDaddy for $125 million. And I think that had I gone out and had the focus, so I guess the question then is, during the bootstrap journey, is there a lever that you're looking for or a milestone that you're like, hey, this is when you should go look at capital because
Yeah.
it's what's going to help you explode versus like if you're
Mhm.
profitable, just keep being profitable.
Yeah, look, I think like I prefaced earlier, I'm not trying to give blanket advice. This is very general
Of course.
advice that I've encountered, or this is a very general scenario that I've encountered countless times. And I didn't say that you shouldn't raise capital. You should just be very intentional and understand
Yeah.
why you need it. In your particular case, it seems that you were in kind of a winner take all market
Yeah.
with, right? So there you might need capital early on in order to capture market share before your competitors get there. But it really depends on the type of business. It depends on you as a founder, what you want, right? Do you want to blitz scale? Do you want to run a profitable company for the next 30 years? And there's ways to achieve, both. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Hmm.
understanding what the really what your business can offer. What are the limitations, and what are your personal priorities?
Makes sense. Um, so before we kind of move on and kind of the next section, let you do in a pitch, like what are some culture centric pillars that might have come to mind as we've had this conversation? Is there anything you've thought about that you're like, I need to say this?
Can you have a
Like
little more?
sometimes we start getting to the end and the
Yeah,
guests are like, wait, hold on. Oh, one more thing, right?
yeah.
They Steve Jobs me there at the end. So I don't want to move forward if you're like, hey, there's this idea about culture, about business that I haven't gotten out yet.
Idea about culture and that I mean, I have a lot of ideas based on what I'm currently working on and plans for the future. But in terms of culture or business in general, nothing worth
Yeah.
mentioning at this
Okay.
time.
Yeah. So, man, thank you. This has been really wonderful to hear about both your culture internally, the having to pivot from mistakes, learning from that, creating culture of growth, and then also it's just fascinating how you see the cultures of your startups, your clients, making an impact there. Um, before we do our quick fire ending,
Yeah.
shameless plug. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, of course. So, look, Shokworks is um, an agency that really does not behave like an agency. We like to align and embed our interests with those of startups at any facet of their growth trajectory. The goal is to get you from point A to point B and then onward to escape velocity as quickly, as inexpensively as possible. And then for some of the larger enterprises, we are an AI first company that focuses on setting up centers of excellence all across Latin America, with a true focus on AI with some of the best talent in the world. So that's the shameless plug.
Yeah. And Shokworks, SHOK, right? There's no
Yes,
C. Shokworks, works spelled the way it should be. Is it .com to
it's
get your site?
Shokworks.io.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Excellent. And of course, we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. So you ready for the quick fire, this or that ending?
Let's do it.
All right. You said that you've made your way to Austin quite a bit because you have an Austin or office here, right? So I'll start off with something local. Torchy's or Taco Deli?
Ooh, Torchy's. Breakfast tacos.
Absolutely. Do you DoorDash or do you go pick up your food?
I either go and dine in a restaurant or I DoorDash. I don't really do takeout.
You'd rather sit down. Okay. All right. Movies in the theater or waiting for it to stream?
Depends on the movie.
Call or text?
I honestly call. I'm old school.
Oh, wow. Okay. Last one, DC or Marvel?
DC.
Or neither. DC.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say neither, but I don't want to,
You don't want to alienate yourself with all the nerds listening? Yeah.
It's not my style, but DC if I have to pick one.
Nice. Well, Alejandro, this has been a great call. Thank you so much for just all the words of wisdom and and just giving us your time.
No, thank you so much, Jason, for having me. This was very good.
Good. All right. Well, this was Alejandro Laplana, the founder and CEO of Shokworks. Check them out. And we will see you next time here on the Work Cultured podcast. Bye-bye.
Take care.